Oh, we finally gotten to a Friday. Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to tonight's Joe Chaffee Weather Show. As we head into the weekend, summer, they did the summer solstice thing today, so the new season has begun. And we're at the weekend, and we should certainly use a break here in the Northeast and down into the Mid-Atlantic states with all the thunderstorms that we've had to deal with, and we're going to get that break, which is a good thing. Uneventful for the weekend for the most part, just some minor issues with regards to maybe some gusty winds that we have right now in my neck of the woods, and maybe a little upper air disturbance that's going to be swinging down across eastern New England. It might clip parts of Long Island and Connecticut and points east, with clouds and a tiny chance of a spot shower during the afternoon tomorrow. But for everybody else, it is just going to be a very, very nice day. Now, all the activity in terms of showers and thunderstorms shifting back to the west again, and in areas where it has been commonplace. And here's WPC's 7-day forecast. Not too bad here in my neck of the woods, a bit of a break in the Northeast. Most rainfall amounts for this coming week, actually in a stretch from southern New England down into North Carolina, under 3/4 of an inch, and in some places even under a 1/4 of an inch. So that's a good thing. But where it's not a good thing is what you see back in the middle Mississippi Valley, down into the southern plains. It's another solid round of rains in some places, talking about 5 inches or more in an area sectioned out in parts of Oklahoma. And this is all because of the deep trough in the west. That is correct. Awesome Gaming, and thank you for hitting Super Chat on this Friday night. I appreciate it. Lots of rain coming for Oklahoma, no question, and some severe weather for Saturday as well in the southern plains, because of this deep trough that is dropping into the west and into the Rockies. And in fact, remember, I always you look for the signatures on the satellite in terms of the how impressive these systems can look sometimes. And here's this one really stands out. Look at the upper low that is evident dropping down out of southwestern Canada and into Montana. That comma shape there, very, very well defined. So it just shows you just how deep this trough is. And in fact, to me, in terms of you want to do some, if you want to just compare it back and adjust, do a little bit of seasonal adjusting, this trough is every bit as deep as some of the deep troughs we saw back in May in the plains and in the northern Rockies, when we were seeing snows falling in parts of Colorado. And in fact, one of our occasional commentators here on the chat board, Ruthless Goat, who is in Colorado, brought that up to me today about seeing snow in the mountains in Colorado. Certainly that is going to happen with a trough this deep. But again, all the action now shifting into the west. One of the standouts on the satellite as far as the east is concerned, and of course we had to get rid of that ridiculous frontal boundary that was going nowhere all week long. Well, we're doing that with a developing storm near Nova Scotia tonight, and it's kind of stretched out east, northeast, west, southwest. If you look at how the clouds are oriented there, which is one of the reasons why my area this morning, and in some places even into early afternoon, had to deal with rain and leftover clouds. But now the drier air has pushed that cloud cover offshore, and we are starting to clear out. That system is going to be out there tomorrow spinning around, and that's why I mentioned the possibility of a little upper air disturbance coming down during the afternoon, clipping parts of eastern New England and maybe down to about eastern Connecticut, eastern Long Island, and points east, with a few hours of clouds and the odd chance that there could even be a spot shower. But everybody else sitting in a lot of dry air that's all being funneled down from eastern Canada to the lakes and then down into the mid-Atlantic states. It just is, it's really nice to have the first weekend of summer in a lot of ways, at least we should be up in at least in the low to mid 80s on a daily basis, if not a bit higher, from eastern PA to southern New England, and we're going to be shy of that over the next couple of days. But I don't know that anybody's going to really complain too much if they don't have to have their air if they don't have to have the AC running, and it could save a little bit on electricity. Now, here's the SPC's view for tonight, where we have enhanced risk in Kentucky and parts of Tennessee, southernmost Indiana and Ohio. That's a pretty wicked-looking squall line that's beginning to develop there and moving southeastward. But you'll notice that the dry push is well south of where the frontal boundary was during this week. It has pushed itself down through Virginia and just about into North Carolina. So from there northward, we are seeing no thunderstorm risk at all, which no one's complaining about. And you've got that marginal risk down into Georgia and Alabama. Small area of slight risk in Kansas and in parts of eastern Colorado, and also an area of slight risk up in eastern South Dakota, eastern North Dakota. Again, what's going on in the west is all part of that deep trough that is coming around. Now, we do actually have some heat, believe it or not, and that is showing up in that, I guess that's orange in the Gulf states, in much of Texas, cut Texas in half, the whole eastern half of Texas, southern Oklahoma, Arkansas, and in through Missouri and Alabama, and also a small portion of coastal southeast Georgia, South Carolina, in that these areas are going to see temperatures up into the low and mid 90s, and you combine that with the usual round of oppressive humidity, and we are talking about heat indices that are up over 105. I always have problems with these things, having lived down in the South especially. I know what summer heat and humidity are like. I lived through it for enough years. I just find that need to make everything sound so much more apocalyptic than it already is. I don't quite get it. It's hot and humid, and we know that. It's kind of pushing the envelope, but heat indices running up there at about 105, and that might be perhaps on the upper end, but nonetheless, it's always as if we have to keep grasping either for the higher number in the summertime when it comes to heat, or the lower number in the wintertime when it comes to wind chill. And if we could just we get it. Meanwhile, you've got flood watches up already in parts of Oklahoma and in Kansas. You've got flood watches up through Missouri, Illinois, southern Indiana, and into Kentucky. Severe thunderstorm watches working right now, and we've got various severe thunderstorm warnings happening in the area in Kentucky, northern Tennessee, southern Illinois, and southeastern Missouri. So this is where all the action is, and it's going to, again, stay mainly concentrated there as we move through the weekend. Now let's jump over to the radar, and I already have it centered in the one very active area tonight. A pretty decent squall line. Looks like it just went through Evansville, Indiana, and pushing into western Kentucky. Also the southern part of that line in southern Missouri. Nice signature. You look at the radar signature there. The nice little shortwave trough that's producing this. But this area is going to wind up going into that dry air and falling apart. So it's not as if there's danger of this coming eastward. It's just not going to happen. In the meantime, in the northeast, we have what's left of the rain in down East Maine, and also in southeastern New England around the Cape, and that is sliding slowly to the east. A little bit of instability showers going on through parts of well up into upstate New York and in central Pennsylvania. Those are all going to die out in short order. Not too much happening in the southeast. It's very quiet actually across much of the southeast and down to Florida, other than an isolated shower here and there. A little bit of isolated activity right now in Texas, and nothing in the area where we see some risk for later. That'll come probably tonight. Some action going on in Colorado, and here's that Here's that upper low. Look at the spinning here up in northern Montana. That's that upper low that is dropping down. Very impressive for this time of year, no doubt about it. Now, here's the surface map tonight. We've got a surface low sitting over Nova Scotia, a 992 low. That's not too shabby for this time of year. Gradient is relatively tight, again, given the time of year. We've seen some gust up into the high 20s to near 30 miles an hour in some places in my area. High pressure up north of Lake Superior. This gradient's going to take some time relaxing because of the fact that it's going to, that low is going to be out there for a while, at least through Saturday and into early Sunday. In the meantime, by the way, look where the front now is. It is pushed all the way down into to Charleston before it stalls out. So you really have had a fairly decent push of air. You've got dew points in the 50s all the way down into North Carolina, and even into South Carolina, you're looking at dew points that are generally in the upper 50s and low 60s, which it really is not that bad. But further north, we're celebrating. We've got dew points falling through the 50s, and we'll be down into the 40s before too long. And the boundary is kind of snaking across Georgia, back through Illinois, across Missouri. Just kind of does this funny look here as it runs back through Kansas and then arcs around in Colorado and then goes back up through the Dakotas. So that's where your zone of issues will be for the coming days. Storm Prediction Center for Saturday showing a large area of slight risk. Here's where that frontal boundary is going to be. So from South Carolina, Georgia, up through eastern Tennessee, much of central and western Kentucky, down through southern Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, and then you've got enhanced risk tomorrow in Oklahoma and into Kansas. So on top of the rain risk, you've got enhanced risk of severe weather here. That is not a shocker if you're pushing temperatures up into the low and mid 90s that far north as that trough begins to swing around, and marginal risk elsewhere, but nothing up in the northern mid-Atlantic and through New England and back through the Great Lakes. Nothing as far as thunderstorms for South Tech, the southern parts of Texas and much of the state of Louisiana. Not even in general thunderstorm activity, as is Mississippi and southern Alabama. And we're seeing just as general risk of thunderstorms in Florida. There's no shocker there, and on up through the northern Rockies. So let's mosey along to what the models are doing here. First off, we'll start with the NAM model tonight. And we are at Friday afternoon, of course, and again, there's your thunderstorm activity. Notice, by the way, how the NAM does not have a real grasp of what's happening. The NAM has nothing. Here's the radar. Where's that radar shot? Let me go back to this. Look at the radar here in the Ohio Valley, okay? And now take a look at what the NAM has. I mean, seriously? Hang on, sorry about that. Just 1 second. That was a mishit on my part. I mean, seriously, how could you possibly be this far off? But it is, and this has been an ongoing issue with these short-term models, having a very, very difficult time. It really didn't grasp what was happening in my neck of the woods yesterday at all. None of them did. Some of the models had absolutely nothing. So I think it's more important to pay attention to the dynamics and the risk areas that SPC pulls out, and not what models are doing with respect to their placement for showers and storms. What we can say, at least, is that that boundary zone being indicated makes sense to me, and it gets pushed to the south. High pressure building here in the east. You start to see flare-ups of showers and storms on Saturday. Let me just back that up. You can see the NAM's got snow up in Colorado there, and then the spinning surface low under the upper low up in Montana. And running through the weekend, we're fine. Starting on Monday, we're going to start to transition over. You start to see that energy to the west begins to shift eastward with some showers and storms. What's happening is we are going to be seeing the upper low that's to the east move away and pull out. Here we go. We'll back it up. So this is our issue, of course. You kicked out that short wave, got rid of the frontal boundary. Look how deep that trough is in the west, in the Rockies. Closed upper low in Montana. Short wave digging and swinging around. But now in between, you got a lot of amplitude here. Deep trough off the East Coast, deep trough in the Rockies. Nice ridge pops up in the middle, which keeps things great for the weekend. Northwest flow aloft, east of the Appalachians. Southwest flow on the other side of it, going into the middle Mississippi Valley and through the southern plains. And that short wave there in eastern Colorado would argue for thunderstorms across Kansas, Oklahoma, and parts of Missouri and Iowa on Sunday. Now that trough is going to try to push eastward as far as it can. It's only going to be able to get so far because if you look on the far right, you can still see what's left of the trough dropping down off of between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. And with it kind of just sitting out there, it's trying to hold the ridge in place. So I'm going to switch over to the GFS so we can go a little further. There's your ridge. Now, the trough in the west gets deflected up over the Great Lakes, which says to me that we're not going to see a whole lot with respect to showers and storms coming eastward next week. And in fact, on the upper left, there's the edge of a strong upper low that's diving into the Pacific Northwest. So now all of a sudden, you're getting ridging building up from the plains northwestward into Canada, and kind of this gentle west-northwest flow, relatively gentle and warm west-northwest flow from the Great Lakes to the northeast, and we're on the edge of that northwest flow. So to me, that says it's going to be very warm. We are going to see weather systems moving through in that northwest flow every couple of days or so, bringing through either troughs or weak cold fronts, and that should be just about it with respect to that. No widespread outbreaks of showers and storms for next week. Much of the time, I think it's going to be rain-free. And when you get the shower and thunderstorm threat, my guess is that for most people, you probably won't see one. It'll be target practice. You're going to have to be in the right place at the right time. So on the GFS and its radar view, there's your even the GFS tonight's doesn't have a clue as to what's on the radar. That drops southeastward and disappears, and in fact it outdoes the NAM because it drops it down further south and west than where the NAM does it because of where the GFS takes the high. Here we are for Sunday. High pressure over Pennsylvania, great in the east. The boundary zone in the Ohio Valley just kind of sits there. Sunday night, pretty decent outbreak of showers and storms across Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. Now you're getting your trough swinging into the Great Lakes. Here we are at Monday evening. Still good here. A narrow stick of showers and storms in Ohio, West Virginia, and then that kind of lifts up to the north. And as we go through next week, really, you see there really isn't a whole lot in terms of activity. You get some diurnal stuff that pops up, but nothing regarding widespread action. So I think we're going to keep it that way for as long as we possibly can. Let's look at the tropics, because we actually have something on the Pacific side, such as it is, because it ain't much. And here's the, let's go to the eastern North Pacific. And nothing forecast to develop over the next 48 hours, but over the next 5 days, they actually do highlight an area of disturbed weather between 10 and 15 degrees north and centered at about 110 degrees west. Look, I just put this up. I'm just putting this up there only because of the fact that for meteorological purposes only, we know that these things are not threats that are out in that part of the Pacific. Usually, they get closer to the coast of Mexico. We pay a little closer attention to them. But for the most part, they're non-issues. I'm just looking at these really from the perspective of just trying to see if we can gain a clue as to whether we might eventually see some Atlantic development. So I like to pay attention to what's going on in the Pacific. And if you look at the Pacific satellite loop at the moment, we do have a little bit of action along its intertropical convergence zone, seeing some disorganized convection that's starting to develop and moving westward. Obviously, no signs of any circulation, but one of the things that's intrigued me about this Pacific season so far is that it is very late to get going. In the satellite era, this is the third latest starting season, and if we take it for another handful of days, it may wind up being the second latest or perhaps even the latest starting season. So, and the reason why I'm paying attention to this is because of the fact that we have a weak El Nino. All things being equal, the Pacific should at least have produced a couple of named storms by now, or at the very minimum, a tropical depression, or maybe a weak tropical storm. But there's been absolutely nothing. So there are other factors at work here, but I just wonder about the state of the El Nino if we're not seeing a tropical development impact. That being said, bear in mind that on the Pacific side, you can easily, throw out 3 storms in the matter of a couple of days once the conditions get ripe for tropical storm development. So the lack of activity can easily be corrected. Go back over the last few years and you'll see some gangbuster months where you saw a lot of tropical storm development and hurricane development happen awfully quick. So, on the one hand, you want to see if there's any meaning behind it. On the other hand, you want to be careful and try not to read too much into all of this. Ruthless Goat, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. And Javon Perry, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. That's a cigar for me for the drive home tonight, and I really do appreciate it. I know, Javon, you have been lamenting the lack of thunderstorm activity up your way. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact, because you're up where you are in New England. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the fact that you've been really getting into these onshore flows, and that the warm fronts are not pushing all the way up as far north as you would like. The warm sectors are not getting as far north as you would like. I would tell you that here in my neck of the woods, that's been the case the last couple of years, but there's been a notable increase in thunderstorm activity this year. Even on Long Island, where I am, we've actually seen a couple, which in the past 4 or 5 years, there have been very few thunderstorms, even during the time of year where we're more likely to see them, later July and in August, when the water temperatures warm up into the 70s. By the way, the ocean water temperatures have warmed up here into the mid-60s, so the onshore flow situations have less and less impact now. So you're not getting into situations where you're seeing temperatures getting sent down into the 50s and 40s anymore. Instead, when you have the onshore flow, you're in the upper 60s and low 70s, and it feels miserable and muggy. But as we get those water temperatures to edge up a little further, you'll probably see the thunderstorms hold on a bit more. Up your way, Javon, you're gonna have to wait a bit long. Pretty soon, you're gonna have to wait a bit longer. It can't stay like this forever. The one thing that might help, from the standpoint of thunderstorms, that west-northwest flow that's setting up next week, if you get some weak short waves to move along in that flow, those might be a bit more favorable for some thunderstorm action up in New England, because you're gonna do that with short waves, and you're not going to have the wind off the water to cut them down. Maybe right along the immediate coast you get the sea breeze, but in terms of having a general south or southeast flow, you might have that part taken somewhat out of the equation. So perhaps in the west-northwest flow, if you get a couple of short waves to move along, you'll wind up seeing some storms. Although thunderstorm activity as you go further north into New England, it's not quite as robust as you see down my way, and we're not as robust as you see down in and around Washington, D.C., and on. We can take it logically all the way down to Florida if we'd like. All right, so look, it's a Friday, so let's leave it at that and get everybody started on their weekend. And I want everyone to have a nice weekend. I will be probably taking a break from the long live streams this weekend, although I will be doing my regular Weather in 5 in the morning, so look for those to be posted up probably by about 9 o'clock Eastern time, maybe a little bit later than that on Sunday morning. And website posts will be up there on meteorologistjoechaffee.com, so be sure and take a look at that. And, of course, there'll be weather updates for Patreon members on my subscription platform on Patreon, which is only $2 a month. If you're interested in that, there's a link to that on the live stream descriptor, or if you're watching this on a replay descriptor to this video. It's patreon.com/meteorologistjoechaffee. And finally, if you haven't done it already, download my free weather app on Google Play or on the App Store. It is absolutely free, doesn't cost you a dime. Although, if you'd like, you can link it up with your Patreon, and it does help keep ads on the app to an absolute minimum. And I get a cigar and a cup of coffee every once in a while, or a glass of beer, and I'm a happy camper. All right, have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, enjoy yourself, enjoy the nice weather while you have it, and grab a little beach time if you can. And we'll see you on Weather in 5 tomorrow morning.